The faithful come to prayer in the most ethnically diverse town in Ireland. Ballyhaunis in County Mayo tasted immigration decades before the rest of the country, with the opening of a meat plant in the 1970s. Now, almost 40% of the town's population was born abroad, and it's seen as an integration success story. Mohammed is from Aleppo in Syria and runs a meat business with his brother. Ireland's recent surge in immigration hasn't gone unnoticed here.
Now, in the last 2-3 years, it seems to be out of control.
The level of immigration?
The level of immigration, and there was no strict control, same as before. I don't know what changes regarding the government side of it. Look, immigration is okay, but as long as it's controlled, as long as there's Garda vetting behind it, we don't want people that have, dangerous backgrounds or some sort of different backgrounds to be landing in next door neighbour.
The experience of this town is becoming more common, as over the past year, immigration to Ireland has reached a 16-year high. Despite this trend, immigration has never really been a hot political issue here, unlike, for example, in the UK. But that now appears to be changing due to already underlying problems.
Those problems are the inability of the government to provide housing, community infrastructure, services, particularly a fair and efficient health service to every person living on this, in this country. So if every asylum seeker left the country tomorrow, we'd still have those problems.
One independent member of the Dáil, or Irish Parliament, says she's been branded as far right for trying to raise concerns about immigration.
We're at a point where we are in a crisis, a housing crisis, and we're seeing unsustainable levels of immigration. In Britain, the parliamentarians are doing their jobs. That's what the people want raised on the floor of the House of Commons. And this Parliament should be no different here. Our Dáil here should be no different, and we need to discuss these issues.
Small-scale anti-migrant protests eventually culminated in a major riot following a brutal stabbing attack in Dublin. The issue feels different here now. Swathes of Irish culture are based on the emigrant experience in song and literature. Now the country, for the first time, needs to deal with the immigrant experience before those who seek to exploit a vacuum do so again. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in County Mayo.
In November 2023, emergency services responded to a primary school where 3 children had been stabbed. The news quickly spread that the suspect was a homeless Algerian immigrant, causing people to gather at the scene. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere grew tense and grim, marking an unusual sight for Ireland. The images of looting and arson attacks only showed a fraction of a much larger public backlash against the near-record numbers of migrants arriving on Ireland's shores.
I feel very threatened. I'm afraid to go out on my own. My sons won't let me go out on my own.
Ireland's anti-immigration backlash has spiralled into countrywide unrest in recent months, after a sharp rise in the number of foreigners arriving onto its shores.
Unfortunately, I think Ireland is becoming the new Sweden.
Protests, arson attacks, and hardening anti-immigration views have transfused Irish politics with a fervour not seen since the Troubles.
How long are you going to stay out here for?
As long as it takes.
My name's Michael Murphy, and I went to Ireland for the Telegraph to find out what Irish people make of the growing strife. I started my journey in Dublin, where hundreds of people turned out for an anti-immigration march.
We're just fed up with the Irish government. We're just fed up with them. It's like a mass plantation what they're doing here. There's so many unvetted male people being brought over to this country, and they're planting them all in around schools, parks, and we're all feeling very unsafe. We're worried for our children.
We cannot sustain a huge number, that level of foreign people living within the borders of this country, many of which are living off social welfare because they're being attracted here because of the loose welfare laws and immigration laws of the state.
Look after the Irish.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Look after the Irish.
Just messing around with our heads, this whole government, and I don't trust what's going on. I just want I think they're puppets for other powers, the elites, you know, the WHO and, you know, all the rest of it, and possibly even King Charles, just puppets for somebody else, and they're not caring for our own people.
But the Irish and the long-term homeless here from all over the world are living and sleeping in the streets. The council come and take their tents and burn their goods or dump them. And these people are on a housing list 20 and 30 years. But if you come in here off a plane with no passport, you're safe. It's just not right, so there. And to anyone listening to this, call me what the hell you like. Little do I care. Thank you.
Some people have described marches like this as far right. Are you far right?
No, I am a concerned father. I have 3 children. I have 2 daughters and I have a son, 11, 9 and 7. That's why I'm here. Listen, the mainstream media don't report on what goes on really in these areas. There's kids being abducted, there's kids being assaulted, there's kids being raped, there's women being raped, and the mainstream media will not report on it.
To find out more about where the anger is coming from, I went to a traditional Irish pub in the heart of Dublin to sit down with dissident journalist Ben Scallon.
The issue of immigration didn't really come up much in Irish politics. I think we're probably unique in the sense that it's been a major election issue in the UK, in Germany, in America, but across the Western world, while this conversation was unfolding, Irish people haven't really discussed it at election time. And then now, I think around 2019 or 2018, that sort of time period, we saw the beginnings of protests around asylum centres being moved into local areas. And I think that's simply due to a significant uptick that we were seeing, where it was far bigger numbers than what we had experienced previously.
And why do you think the government has made Ireland's borders more porous and has, as you said, rung the dinner bell for asylum seekers and other migrants around the world?
I think that the Irish government is primarily concerned with appearing to be a modern European country, and they admire their European colleagues. They admire countries like Scandinavian countries like Sweden and so on that are progressive and very trendy, I suppose, if you want to put it that way. Unfortunately, I think Ireland is becoming the new Sweden in a way, because the same way people used to talk about Sweden several years ago, that it was this country that was totally off the rails. They've got total strife, total ghettoization. It seems like having seen the failure of that policy in countries like Sweden and in countries like Germany and France, we want to replicate it for some reason that I don't quite understand.
The Irish government has bussed refugees, often at night and with little warning, into towns like Roscrea.
Until recently, anti-immigration rhetoric was uncommon in Ireland. The Irish have a history of fleeing hardship and hunger, emigrating around the world, which is a significant part of their national consciousness. This history partly explains why they typically had relatively positive views on migration. However, this attitude is changing. What caused this dramatic shift in Ireland, and what are the underlying problems?
Sparking local anger and weeks-long demonstrations. I went to Roscrea, where locals have been protesting for 3 weeks outside the town's only hotel, closed down last month after the government struck a deal with its owner to house more than 160 asylum seekers there.
I am out here, first of all, I'm a mother, and I'm very, very concerned about the level of migration that's happening into our town. We are one of the smallest towns in Tipperary, and we have 85% of international protection applicants. That's a huge number for any town, but for a small town like Roscrea that doesn't have any resources, we have over 1,000 IPAs in town. There's only 5,500 of a population in this town. That's a huge amount to expect anybody to take on.
Some people have said that the town has changed over the last few years. They're scared to go out at night. The playground is left without children. No people want to go there anymore. Why is that?
Well, I think a lot of the thing is, and here again, it's the arrogance of the men that are bringing them into the town. They don't provide any services for them. There's no recreational activities. So you have groups of 10 and 15 IPAs standing around in groups. Now, let it be said, if that was 10 or 15 Irish men standing around in groups, I would be intimidated. But when you're walking past a group of men and they're saying something to you in a different language and you don't know what they're saying, it's very, very intimidating. There's women, older women and men here who won't go to collect their pension on a Friday morning in town because the post office, outside the post office, is where they gather. Now, I'm not saying these men could be, they're probably really, really nice lads, but any group that gathers in 15s and 20s is going to be intimidating.
While the protests have been mostly peaceful, some have turned violent, including in Dublin last year, where riots broke out after 3 young children and a woman was stabbed, allegedly by a man of Algerian origin.
We're here in Crooksling, on the outskirts of Dublin, where, as you can see, Garda are stationed behind me after a suspected arson attack on an abandoned nursing home that was due to house migrants last night. Now, this is one of more than a dozen such arson attacks that have happened in Ireland over the past year.
The Irish state has taken in more refugees than it can house, forcing the government to offer asylum applicants tents and sleeping bags as they arrived in Dublin. Since the Russian invasion, nearly 100,000 Ukrainians have been offered refuge in Ireland. I spoke to one Ukrainian refugee outside of an asylum processing centre in Dublin.
You've lived in a tent here for a month.
Yeah.
And how's that been?
Well, for me it was better to stay here because no bombs, no military. I don't live here.
Okay.
I have accommodation for like 7 months or something, and now I have right to work. I received this labor market access. I start to work, and I believe in a month or 2 I will be able to rent something.
And how have the Irish people been? Have they been welcoming?
Irish people are different. In this area, Irish people were very, very kind, really very kind. It's not that city center that were Spire and all that junky people and all that. Here it was very quiet and welcoming place.
Excluding Ukrainians, the number of asylum seekers arriving into Ireland has shot up to more than 26,000 over the past 2 years, a growth of nearly 200% from 2019. To find out more about the surge in refugees coming to Ireland, I spoke to Jim O'Callaghan, an Irish lawmaker from one of the governing parties.
So speaking to people in Roscrea and other parts of rural Ireland, as well as Dublin, people are concerned about unvetted single males entering the country. Do you think that's a valid concern?
Well, I can understand people's concerns, but when people come in, there's a rules-based system that operates in Ireland. And I think one of the failures that maybe we have, as government have, and previous governments have had, is we don't explain the system to people. And obviously the issue that's been looked at present is the international protection system. This derives from an EU directive. We transposed it into Irish law in the International Protection Act 2015. And listen, it provides that a minister can remove a person.
Ireland is a small country with a population of only 5 million people, but between 50 to 80 million people worldwide have full or partial Irish heritage. In the United States, 36 million Americans claim Irish as their primary ethnicity, constituting 11% of the entire population. Famous Irish Americans include Henry Ford, Kurt Cobain, and John F. Kennedy. In Canada, the percentage is even higher, with 14% of the population having Irish ancestry. Australia tops it off, with 30% of the population, or 7 million people, being of Irish descent. The Irish diaspora is why Gaelic games are played worldwide and why the Chicago River turns green every March. In the mid-1800s, the Irish population was much larger, peaking at 8.5 million people. However, a disaster was looming. A type of fungus caused potato crops to fail across Europe, leading to a severe food crisis in Ireland. This crisis lasted 4 years and drove Ireland into a nightmare of hunger and disease. 1 million people died of starvation and another million left the country. By 1900, the Irish population had nearly halved to 4.4 million people, with 40% of all Irish-born people living abroad.
Who's applying for international protection if that person is perceived as being a threat. And obviously individuals come in as well, they're fingerprinted, anyone who has convictions or is perceived as being a threat can be removed. But you're right, some people are very concerned about the fact that what's referred to as unvetted men are moving into their area. But I think we need to explain that that's not the case, because when you look at the system that's in place, there are powers in place for the minister to remove people who are dangerous or who are a threat.
Now, we're hearing a similar story in places like Roscrea and elsewhere about the government doing a sort of backdoor deal with a hotel or a business to house asylum seekers and not telling the local community or consulting with the local community in advance. People feel like they're not in control of the future of their community and their livelihoods. What would you say to people who have those concerns?
Well, it's a difficult issue for all concerned. Obviously, because of the significant numbers that have come in the past year, government must provide sheltered accommodation for people who are seeking international protection. That's our obligation. We're finding it difficult to do it. Like, there's no point in pretending that we're not finding it difficult to do. And of course, the reason for that is because in 2022, 140,000 people come in. We've seen 100,000 Ukrainians, and there's more people coming in. In terms of the international protection applicants, we have an obligation as well to provide them with sheltered accommodation. So one of the reasons, this is new for Ireland, so the government is going around trying to find alternative accommodation. And that's why units such as hotels are being looked at, or old nursing homes. And yeah, you're right, it does cause concern in the local community, particularly if it's the only hotel in the town. But also, I've got to say to you, there's lots of other places in my constituency and throughout the country where people have come in and there haven't been objections.
Dara O'Brien.
There are some TDs who have spoken out against immigration in the Irish Parliament. 6 of them have formed a loose coalition called the Rural Independent Group. I sat down with one of their members, Carol Nolan, to hear their side of the story.
Well, look, I have never seen the feeling as strong. I've been elected since 2016 to the Dáil, and I have never seen the feeling as strong on the ground on a particular issue as it is on the issue of immigration. I do feel that people will protest at the ballot box, and I do feel that if government don't change direction quickly, as I've stated before, that they will be punished. And I do believe that you will see more independent candidates and more candidates that are of the view that we are all at an unsustainable level of immigration. I believe that that's the representation that people want.
Do you think immigration is fueling anti-EU sentiments in Ireland?
It certainly is, yes, it certainly is. People feel like myself, look, I'm frustrated. I believe there's more government could do in terms of pushing back. Like Hungary has pushed back, and as I say, Poland and other countries. There's more they could do. I believe that they have a responsibility to represent the Irish people. They're not doing so at EU level. But there is a lot of frustration over EU dictating everything that a country should do, including the numbers that they should take in and so forth. So there is definitely frustration over that dictatorship as some people see it.
And you read a lot about the far right in Ireland, especially in recent years. Is there a far right in Ireland, and what does it look like?
I don't believe, look, there may be a very small element. Being honest, I haven't met anybody who is far right. I've met grandparents coming into my office. I've met people from other countries. I have a good friend from Turkey, and she's expressed concern over the numbers coming in. I've good friends from all over the world. They're not far right. I haven't, but look, that's not to say there isn't an element there. Of course, in these situations, in these conditions, you will get elements that will come up overnight, like far right, as it has done across Europe.
Leo Varadkar's government says it can tackle the problems around immigration with better messaging and tougher laws to censor what it deems as hate speech. But the Irish public say their concerns are legitimate, a view which is becoming harder to ignore as it gains political momentum. It's beginning to look like the Irish government's vision of an island which looks more like its European neighbours is coming true. A multicultural country ripe for populist revolt.
Ireland didn't industrialise as quickly as other Western European countries, and in the early 20th century it remained largely agrarian. Between 1949 and 1956, their real national income rose by only 8%, while the average European increase was 40%. The Irish population had dwindled to 3 million people, with nearly 500,000 leaving the country to find work abroad. However, this was about to change.
Immigration is changing what Ireland looks like. Refugees are welcome here! In a way and at a pace that some are objecting to.
Scumbags, that's what you get! Scumbags!
During the Dublin riots in November, the issue exploded onto the streets literally. Last year, just over 13,000 asylum seekers arrived in the country, mainly through its airports. That's on top of over 100,000 Ukrainian refugees.
Touch my flag, stop touching that flag. Stop touching my flag.
The backdrop, a housing crisis. It's also being weaponised by a network of anti-immigrant influencers online.
You should feel the same way if you call yourself Irish, but you don't because you have no pride in your nation.
Their mantra, less Céad Míle Fáilte, more Ireland is full. Outside the town of Naas, County Kildare, about an hour from Dublin, around 300 people marched to a site set to accommodate Ukrainian refugees. This site, a similar facility nearby, is at capacity. This one will open soon for almost 1,000 Ukrainians. Ireland has taken in a lot of Ukrainian refugees, but a relatively small proportion of asylum seekers per capita from elsewhere compared to other countries in Europe.
We have a right to know. Nobody told us.
This is part of a growing anti-immigration movement across the country. Last year, there were over 600 demonstrations like this around Ireland, double the number of the year before.
And when the Irish emigrated, they worked for everything they ever earned. They got nothing for free.
Lads,
these people coming here are getting everything for free.
Jessica McLaughlin is one of the organisers.
They've been out in the snow, in the rain, in the hail.
Says their main objection to the new arrivals is the strain they'll put on already stretched public services.
In 90 days, we were told those 985 will be turned out to find their own accommodation. If they don't find it, the government will find it for them. Okay? There's thousands of homeless people already here that don't have homes. I live in the middle of a field in a mobile home because there's no home for me.
A local committee was established last year and local councillors were informed. The people demonstrating, though, seem to have no faith at all in any democratic institution. That's why, despite a court injunction, they're camped outside the site day and night.
There is no trust. They were put in there without telling anybody. How can you trust somebody that puts something like this under your nose and expect
Did you trust those institutions before this happened?
No, because this is happening all over the country.
Are you nervous about?
We're afraid we're going to be labelled as racist and that we don't like people from different places. But that's not the case. But the fact of the matter is, the facilities we have right now at the minute don't facilitate anybody that's already living here.
The image of Ireland as a relatively undeveloped country contrasts sharply with the image you might have of Ireland today. In the 1990s, a period of economic boom began. Just look at this chart. This is the GDP of the UK, and this is that of Ireland until 1990. That year marked a shift. Ireland's economy began growing rapidly, and by 2018, they had a GDP per capita of over $60,000, much higher than the UK's $38,000. They transformed from a relatively poor country by Western European standards into one of the world's richest. Ireland's quality of life drastically improved, and in 2005 they ranked #1 in the Economist Quality of Life Index, above Switzerland and Norway. This impressive economic growth was primarily fueled by direct foreign investment. Dublin's city centre now boasts gleaming new office towers, with tech giants like Google and Apple establishing massive European headquarters in Ireland. However, statistics statistics can be deceiving. A publication from the IMF this year placed Ireland as the country with the second highest GDP per capita in the world, only behind Luxembourg, with well over $100,000. In reality, the average income is closer to $48,000. So Ireland's prosperity isn't as rosy as these statistics suggest.
When migrant rights are under attack.
On the same day in Dublin, a pro-migrant demonstration marches along O'Connell Street, past the flashpoints of the Dublin riots last year. In the crowd, Abdul from Afghanistan fled when Kabul fell 3 years ago.
You know, I love Ireland. I am becoming in love with Ireland every day and every time. But when you see the negativity and the protest against refugees or the protest, I don't know. It's really frustrating. It makes you disappointing. And when you come here and see this protest and riots and everything, you're like, I escaped from these things. Why I ended up again?
It's a long way to Tipperary and the town of Roscrea. This is Racket Hall, the town's last hotel. It was recently closed to the public in order to accommodate up to 160 asylum seekers.
Keep walking!
On the 15th of January, the first busload of 17 asylum seekers arrived.
You're selling out your own people, you scumbags! That's what you are! Scumbags!
It included women and children who had to run the gauntlet of angry protesters. It got very ugly.
Step push me up.
Same town, different refugee centre, and a video that never went viral of elderly local residents visiting with asylum seekers at the Sean Ross Abbey. Once upon a time, one of Ireland's infamous mother and baby homes.
Daniel, come on, he's very shy.
The place is run by Christine Murphy, Roscrea born and bred. Her reaction to the ugly demonstration at Racket Hall down the road.
It was absolutely disgrace, but I'd like to say as well that that was not the majority of people in Roscrea.
There's a complicated set of dynamics at play in this town. Concern, for example, about what another closed hotel will mean for tourism. But also a relatively new campaign of harassment and intimidation, both of refugees and of the people working with them.
How close has that come to your front door?
Well, we've had people come in and say they want to set fire to the place. We've had people drive around, taking videos, putting out false accusations.
In the last 5 years, there have been over 20 arson attacks on properties in Ireland associated with asylum seekers. And on the 23rd of November last year, it wasn't just asylum centres set alight.
Nonetheless, Ireland became one of Europe's most prosperous nations, leading to a historic reversal. For centuries, more people left Ireland than arrived, but their economic growth and welcoming attitude made them a popular destination. On this graph, you can see that the number of new arrivals grew steadily, continuing even after the markets crashed in 2008. During this period, the number of foreign-born nationals increased from 10% to 20%. Many Irish had a positive opinion of this development. Polls showed that most people viewed immigration as crucial for economic progress. In 2015, at the height of the European migrant crisis, a poll of 12 European nations revealed that 88% of Irish people sympathised with Syrian refugees arriving in Ireland, the highest figure of all participating countries. Most people agreed with government spending to help these refugees, and 2/3 of the population weren't concerned that refugees were putting extra pressure on public services like education, health and housing.
Earlier in the day, 3 children and a school worker were stabbed in the centre of Dublin. The suspect, a naturalised Irish citizen, originally from Algeria. Anti-migrant campaigners called people out into the street. And that evening, the worst rioting Dublin had seen in years. On the day, influencers like Gavin Pepper, in a now deleted tweet, wrote, "Everyone, city centre tonight, 7 p.m. No excuses. Everyone out. Enough is enough. Hashtag Ireland is full." We caught up with him at a demonstration in Dublin last week.
Do you regret some of your tweets on that evening at all?
I don't regret any of my tweets because I called for a peaceful protest on the night, and when I arrived there and I seen that it was getting out of hand, I deleted my tweet because I didn't want my people that come to the peaceful protesters in any way to be in any danger in the city centre. That's the reality of it.
Gavin Pepper is running as an independent for a council seat in local elections in June. Our exchange, streamed by his supporters, becomes campaigning, becomes content.
I'm for people who have been left behind, working class mothers that have been left behind. The state doesn't care about them, and neither do you.
Another case in point. On the 27th of February, around 100 people gathered outside an asylum centre in Selbridge on the outskirts of Dublin. They were here because far-right influencers circulated a rumour online that a young girl had been raped inside by 3 migrants. The Gardaí, the Irish police, said it wasn't true.
It's Philip Dwyer here, citizen journalist.
But that didn't stop people like Philip Dwyer reporting from the scene.
I reported on what was said on social media. That's what I reported.
circulated a rumour.
I reported like you report on what was
that's
said
different,
on
isn't
social
it, though?
media.
You circulated a rumour. That was wrong.
Do you know for a fact that a child wasn't raped in that premises?
No, according to the Gardaí said that the child was attacked by someone known to the child, but that there was no sexual assault involved.
So you
now,
know
that's what the Gardaí said.
Do you think the Gardaí are telling the truth on everything?
Why did you circulate that rumour?
What do you mean circulate a rumour? It was reported on social media. I didn't say whether it was true or untrue. I said it was reported on social media. I'm very careful with my words on social media, by the way.
Dwyer does not like being described as far-right, but his core belief is this, that immigration is a global conspiracy to replace white Irish people.
Just to be clear, your narrative is that there's a global
The truth
plan,
is my narrative.
There's a global plan to replace the Irish.
Yeah. Replace the white race.
It's a big lie anyway.
Who's in charge of it? The people who control the money are in charge of it. That's a simple question.
The great
Thanks for asking.
replacement theory. It's pure textbook.
Is that your opinion?
Right.
Is that your opinion?
Textbook theory.
Is that your opinion?
Like the great replacement theory, it's literally from the playbook.
Is it? And so follow the money. Who controls all the money in this world?
In 2022, only 4% of people felt that immigration was a concern. A year later, that number had risen to 29%, making it the largest issue among voters, followed by housing and healthcare. It's crucial to understand that these issues are interconnected. There's a massive housing shortage, with a need for 250,000 more homes, and homelessness is at a record high. For many, it has become impossible to buy a house or find affordable rental property. On top of this, Ireland is among the most expensive countries in the EU, with household expenditure 46% higher than the EU average. Other services, notably hospitals, are also under strain. Many doctors have long waiting lists, and nearly 3% of Irish people have unmet medical needs. Small towns are overwhelmed by migrants, adding to a feeling of insecurity. In Dublin, tent cities have sprung up due to a lack of available accommodation, and people are taking to the streets to demand action from their representatives. Much of the public pushback has been civilised and peaceful, but some chose a different path. In November 2018, a hotel earmarked to house 100 asylum seekers was set on fire. Since then, 27 fires have been set at properties rumoured to house refugees, most occurring after November 2023. In Dublin alone, there have been 9 reported incidents of arson since early 2023. The event that captured the world's attention occurred late last year, marking the worst riots in Dublin's history. It's important to note that this is an extremity. Most protests are civilised, peaceful, passionate and emotional, showing solidarity. Immigration is likely to play a significant role in the national elections scheduled for early 2025, a first in Irish history.
It seems the UK's Rwanda plan could be working in a way because Ireland's in meltdown over mass numbers of migrants apparently coming over from Britain. And this rise of tented cities has led to outbreaks of riots and even petrol bombs across the country. Well, I can now speak with Irish talk show host and broadcaster Niall Boylan. Niall, welcome to the show. A pleasure to have you. You're a fantastic broadcaster, and I'm proud to say that here at GB News, unlike a lot of the establishment media, we have been keeping a very close eye on what's been going on in Ireland and the political divisions it's been caused and the treatment of citizens, regular citizens who object to mass migration being called far right and worse by the political class and the media. Niall, we're approaching elections in around about a week's time. Tell me, what's the mood like in Ireland, and do you think there's appetite for change?
I think there's more than appetite for change. I mean, we see a government who have been completely ignoring the people, and not just ignoring, they've proactively encouraged this, to be honest with you, over the last 5 or 6 years. And when I was working on radio, I had to give it up there recently, but I was working on radio, I was listening to my callers and my audience telling me one thing, and government politicians who I spoke to telling me something completely different. So the disconnect had become huge. So the government are going to get a good kicking in this election, I imagine, including the opposition, who've been equally as bad and sat idly by for the last 5 years and did absolutely nothing about it. They're now all scrambling with headlines saying, you know, we're going to take a hard approach to immigration, we're going to charter planes. They're saying all these things now because we've got a week to an election. But the public don't believe them anymore. It's getting worse by the day. Again, for the 5th time in the last 2 months, we've seen these tents being removed. And here's the madness of this. The government are funding NGOs who are providing these tents. The government are coming along, removing them with those big claw diggers that you can see on the screen there, and then giving the NGOs more money to buy more tents to give them the next day. And by the next day, these are all gone today, but by tomorrow, there'll be 50 more tents. And not only that, when they take the tents up, they put these barricades up, so average citizens can't even walk past their own. It's a very famous and beautiful canal that runs through Dublin. It's getting completely out of control, and I'm sure Rishi Sunak is absolutely delighted with himself with his Rwanda plan, because maybe they won't be going to Rwanda, but they're coming to Ireland. That's where they're sending them. And today makes it a lot worse, because we have a High Court case today in Ireland. The Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission are taking the state to court, essentially saying you have an obligation to these asylum seekers to house them or accommodate them, and to triple the money that you're giving them. We're already feeding them, educating them, clothing them, giving them health care, providing them with everything we can. Currently there's 96,000 of them in accommodation across the country, state accommodation, and now they want to triple the money to give them 339. That's more than pensioners get in this country. It's more than anybody gets in this country, and we're being asked to do this. We're just the land of milk and honey for asylum seekers here.
And Niall, there's a critical housing shortage in Ireland. There's a huge pressure on public services already. All of this is being exacerbated by the scenes we're seeing on the screens. And that leads me to the political backlash. We've had a political consensus on this. We've even got a Taoiseach in Simon Harris recognising the state of Palestine this week. How does that land with voters who simply care about being able to afford to go to school, being able to afford a house, get a doctor's appointment?
I mean, when I speak to people and they say, you know, they're worried that their children are going to leave the country because they can't afford to live in their own cities anymore, their cost of living is rising, they're worried about immigration. Nobody over the last few weeks has turned around to me and said, I wish the government would recognise the state of Palestine. We need to get our own shop in order before we start worrying about the rest of the world or something that's 6,000 or 7,000 miles away. Although, of course, we all, you know, condemn the deplorable scenes we see of war, be it in Ukraine and Russia or Palestine and Gaza. But I mean, we need to get our own house in order, and we're not doing that. And we're seeing, you know, other political parties in the country encouraging this. What they want to do is, let's speed up the process of these applicants for asylum, most of which are coming from the UK to Northern Ireland, by the way. Let's speed up the process to get them into accommodation, where I'm saying, and other people are saying, well, no, you know, people who are genuinely coming from war and fleeing persecution, absolutely look after them, but the majority are not. The Minister for Integration has said himself that over 60% of these people are economic migrants. That's probably a conservative estimate, and most, over 80%, are coming through Northern Ireland from the border. Now, nobody wants to see a border back in Northern Ireland. We fought tooth and nail, of course, during Brexit to keep the backstop out. So I think the only suggestion or solution for us now, and what a lot of people are suggesting, is a border down the Irish Sea. In other words, that we have reception centres and processing at Larne, Belfast, George Best International Airport to stop them coming into Northern Ireland in the first place. In other words, you can keep them.
OK, Niall Border, we have to leave it there. Excellent, as ever. Thank you very much. Now,
the Irish government has failed to address some root causes of these tensions, such as the housing shortage and rise in living expenses. They now face the uncomfortable truth that their acceptance of migrant communities deeply rooted in their national identity has limits. However, migrants are also necessary. This graph shows the talent shortages in Ireland from 2010 to 2023. Last year, 81% of employers employers had difficulty finding skilled talent. In the Irish healthcare system, 43% of physicians are trained in foreign countries, primarily from Pakistan, Sudan, and the United Kingdom. These industries desperately need more educated staff, which isn't always locally available. The Irish youth, disproportionately considering leaving the country, further complicates the issue. Among 18-24-year-olds, as much as 70% are thinking about emigrating, with most having higher education. But Ireland is waking up, seeing countries like Sweden, which have long served as an ideological model for Irish politicians, facing a more violent backlash from uncontrolled migration. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and for more content like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel.